Hello, my soccer universe. My name is Roland and welcome to Football Talk. Just ahead this weekend. I didn't watch all that much football because I had a little trip to Prague and I was enjoying the town. Only when I come home did I see a little bit. I followed mostly the Austrian Bundesliga. So in this episode we will have a short segment on the Austrian Bundesliga, but over all the other results I will not necessarily skip, but I will only talk briefly about what's happening in Serie A. There were three really outstanding results. We'll talk about that, and then over the other leagues. I will go rather quickly. Also, in the interest of time, it was a rather stressful return for me, also for work. So I hadn't had time to do any calculations. So I'm just gonna tell you what happened and then focus on the big thing. The Champions League starts today. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you see I'm already out in the Champions League background. And I want to do a proper preview for this Champions League campaign. And yes, it's on the day that it starts. So it might be a little bit tight, but even if you listen to this on Wednesday or on Thursday, you still should get something out of it. And on Friday, I'm gonna record probably a short episode reviewing the Champions League games because we have 3 days of Champions League this week, which is exciting, and some good fixtures in there as well. Personally, for me, as I said, I had a great trip to Prague, and you will see some fallout from that as well on my main channel relatively soon. But when I look just at the footballing result, it was a mixed weekend. LASK continued to disappoint. Another blah performance. Milan, on the other hand, had a pretty good game, but only 1-0 win. So overall it ends 1-1 and probably should have at the aggregated score of LASK and Milan probably should have been 2-2, would have been probably more accurate, I would say. 2-0 loss for LASK and a 2-0 win for Milan. But we'll see about that. We'll talk all about that. And I would say let's look at a not so happy version of me talking about the happenings in the Austrian Bundesliga. Honestly, guys, I have to tell you, I feel foolish talking about LASK these days because, they played well before the international break, but defensive frailties, and this has been the Achilles heel. But I thought, international break, there's not too many players missing, we are gonna work on that. And then you play against Altach, a game where we never have lost at Altach. And I really thought there's a good chance that we actually might get at least a point out of there. Boy, was I wrong. This was another nothing performance out west. Second round at Tirol, this time at Altach, and you lose with a penalty. And the penalty foul is so stupid. First, George Bello cannot fend off the defender to let the ball go out into touch. And then when the attacker steals the ball from him, he just pulls him down in the box. I mean, just a few meters away from the goal. It is such a stupid reaction. One where you cannot help but think that there's only gonna be a penalty. I mean, you pull down an attacker. Why do I say defender? And yeah, penalty. 1-0, and then it could have been more. I mean, Greil hit the crossbar in the second half. LASK barely had a chance. I mean, I don't remember even a good chance. And yes, we got a new striker, Sasha Kalajdzic from Wolves. However, he has 3 ACL tears in his career already. He's just coming back from an injury, so it is slow. Just not positive. And now next week is the derby, and it's not sweeter that Blau-Weiß won 3-0 against GRK, meaning that GRK is now for sure last place and LASK is only in 11th, level on points with GRK. But it doesn't placate me because they also got a new striker, Sean Weissman, an Israeli striker who had made some postings that has everyone in huge uproar. In a way, I'm glad that we didn't sign him, although I like his qualities. I mean, he has been a great striker in Austria, I think in the 1920 season even, or 2020-21 season for Wolfsburg. He went to Spain, I think, Valladolid and then some other places, but now, because of his postings, no one wanted to have him anymore. Blau-Weiß is picking it up, and they were rewarded so far. He scored 2 goals against GRK. Arguably the worst team in the league at the moment, because I fear that LASK belongs among these. And I don't say this lightly at all. At least the fans will be back for the derby next week. The other results, we had actually 2 big games, and the first one of these was Wolfsburg taking on Salzburg, beating them 3-1. 3-1. Salzburg is not looking good. It is at the moment very unlikely to think that Salzburg are a title candidate. We'll talk about who is probably at the moment the best team in Austria, but this was absolutely nothing from Salzburg. Or in the first minute, Pink scores, then Schöpf and Gattermeier made 3-0 by the 51st minute. Zukic assisting the latter two of these. Vertessen pulls one back in the 62nd, but really not much coming. When I look at the Sunday games, Ried, they had a COVID outbreak, so many players were sick. Was almost expected. Even without that, I would have expected them to lose against Hartberg because they were in such a high, winning the two derbies in Linz and then the local derby in the cup. It was about to happen, and so they lose 2-0 at home to Hartberg. And while they might claim that they shouldn't have lost, I actually thought that Hartberg did deserve that win, at least from the highlights that I saw. But I told you who's still going to be the best team in Austria at the moment. It's Rapid. Rapid, absolutely Rapid, and I've said it before, I'm a little bit surprised about this, but they fully deservedly won 4-1 against the VSG. Great first half, they already had a 2-0 lead through Wurmbrand and Mbuyi, the top striker from the second league last season. Then they let it go a little bit, Berkeley pulls one back, but then Zvetkovic and Tilio score two more. Rapid looking really, really well, and they actually look like a team. Things are working for them at the moment. And yes, a year ago we talked very similarly. And I don't really know why I feel a little bit better now, but I think they've done a really, really good transfer window. Most of the transfers made sense and made them stronger, unlike LASK, where some unknown players came and it didn't work out. And then another team that's a little bit in trouble, the Moe Sturm. They lost a lot of players, made a lot of money. However, it is very thin now and they want to get some youth team players in. It doesn't look convincing at the moment. They lose at home to Austria Vienna without having really a chance. I think an equalizer was chalked off. I think there was an offside. Then they had a penalty call that, has been given just before the international break when Miranda handled the ball seemingly in the box. However, this time Wiesing, I think, was even outside the box. So if this was given as a penalty, it would have been a free kick. So in that sense, I think we got the right decisions there. And I said already, that penalty in Salzburg, many were upset with that one. I potentially could see it, but I'd rather not see it. So I will not complain here about that one. I think that overall Austria Vienna found the defensive solidity that they had last season, and they have now 2 wins in a row. And suddenly, the crisis is averted. It's a crazy, crazy world out there. Please excuse me if you're watching this on YouTube. I'm not changing the background now. I did it already a couple of times for this video, but in the interest of time, let's stay with the Champions League background. And I want to start with Serie A, where it was all, I guess, about Saturday. I mean, we started with a pretty big win for Cagliari over Parma, but then Juve Inter again delivered. Plenty of goals, not that many chances. I mean, the XG is relatively low on this one, but Juve were absolutely clinical in that one. And I saw the result, while having dinner, and I couldn't believe that we had another 7-goal game. Last year it was a 4-4. And then when you see the highlights, I mean, there were some great goals in there. Again, not that many chances. And the overall feeling that I got from reading through reviews, watching highlights, also listening a little bit, is that this was a game where Juve were clinical, but it was also a game that kind of Inter threw away, and it shows already early signs of Inter's, I don't want to say demise yet, because Inter has such a talented squad, but it doesn't look great. Let's put it that way. Lloyd Kelly opened the scoring. I mean, he has been one of the most maligned new signings for Juve, but hey, he opens the scoring, but Çalhanoğlu then hits back with a shot from the distance. However, Juve also have a Turkish guy in Kenan Yildiz who takes a shot from far outside the box, and I have to say, Sommer has to do better on that one. He has his fingers there. It's worth a little bit. He's slow to get down, but it was also a really nice strike. However, it takes then about 20 minutes that Inter then really find the next level, and a brilliant equalizer by Çalhanoğlu makes it 2-2, and then it's the Thuram brothers that take over. Marcus Thuram makes it 3-2 for Inter, so they turned the game around, and he thought, now they have Juve. Now they have Juve right where they want them, except that the other Thuram brother also heads it in completely unmarked or not very well marked. And I think Marcus Thuram, similar thing can be said. So it's 3-3, and both Thuram brothers, kind of one-upping themselves. There was also a brilliant shot on the ref cam where both of them next to each other arguing with the referee. It is just wonderful. And then the game is decided on a long-range shot by 19-year-old Arcic, who came from Budućnost from Montenegro. Scores the winner. It was a great swerving shot. However, again, Sommer probably should do better on that one. So Juve win that one. Inter have only won one out of the first 3 games. They're already 6 points behind the Juventus and also the league leaders, because Napoli went to Fiorentina, and this was a match where you really thought this could be a stumbling block. However, they were brilliant. I mean, De Bruyne and Højlund just had arrived scoring the goals. I mean, Napoli is a great place for United players to rekindle their careers, and Antonio Conte said as much afterwards. But first is the De Bruyne penalty, and then Spinazzola assisting Højlund with a deep pass, and it's 2-0 after 15 minutes. Buchanan in the 51st makes it 3 very late on. Ranieri pulls one back, and there were maybe chances to make it even tight again. But Napoli look really imperious at the moment, bar none. Best team in Italy, and Conte is really finding his own at the moment. I mean, you never thought that he could fit every one of his players in midfield. He has now a loaded midfield, but it seems to work. And so, bravo Napoli, bravo Conte. Other interesting results we had, of course, Roma losing at home to Torino with Joel Simeone scoring. That was a little bit of a surprise. So Roma not as smooth as we thought so far. Udinese winning at Pisa. Udinese having a really good start to the season. Pisa still have to find the footing in Serie A, and you better find it soon, otherwise you're in relegation trouble. Atalanta easily 4-1 over Lecce, but it has to be said it's a Lecce team that is probably a relegation candidate, and Sassuolo might not be. They beat Lazio 1-0 at home, and Lazio is a team that is in trouble. I mean, they could not do any signings, the mood is not good, and it was not a very convincing showing. I actually saw a little bit of the second half, and didn't like it a bit what I saw. So that was great. And then Milan-Bologna. First, can I comment on the jersey matchup? Why is Milan playing in yellow at home? I guess to sell this new third jersey. And please don't give me that crap that this is inspired by the 95 jersey that they wore in one game against Arsenal in the Super Cup. Because, I mean, the yellow is the same, but that kit was actually trimmed in red and black. This one is in green. And I don't even want to mention the horrific goalkeeping jersey with green and then one side in orange, one side in pink. I don't get this. But what I get even less is that if Milan is already playing in a light kit, why is Bologna showing up in an all-white one? It was a horrific jersey matchup. I mean, Bologna could have played easily in their home jersey. This is something that I absolutely do not get, and white against yellow is not a proper matchup. But we avoiding now red against blue. I mean, give me an effing break. But that's me on the jersey front. Milan overhand a convincing performance. Yes, there was a goal disallowed for Bologna, but I really thought, especially the first half, that Ruben Loftus-Cheek had some really great runs. He played more or less in the 10 position, which I really didn't expect. Unfortunately, Santi Jimenez, you can see he has no confidence. He got in a few good positions, but he cannot find the back of the net. And it's kind of this negative spiral, and it did not help that, he was rumored to exit from Milan. In any case, in the second half, they finally get the breakthrough, and it's Luka Modrić. A 40-year-old being the best player of Milan. I don't know how to think about it. I mean, on the one side, you have to marvel at Luka Modrić. On the other side, what does this tell you about Serie A? I mean, Serie A wants to be at least the second best league in Europe, which they probably are given the overall density. Yes, La Liga has probably on the top better teams than Serie A. Oh, probably for sure better teams. But I think the overall density in Serie A is a tad better than La Liga, and I think I would put both of them over the Bundesliga. But we'll see this in the Champions League. But that a 40-year-old can run the show is not a good sign. And the same thing goes for Kevin De Bruyne and all these other players that come from the Premier League in and suddenly are stars. There's something not right about that. But what has to be said is that Luka Modrić, he starts the attack from the ball to Loftus-Cheek, who holds on the ball, plays out to Salamakers. And then when you see the replay from and you see how long Modrić is actually waiting at the halfway line and then makes the run, is completely forgotten. Everyone from Bologna can put it into the net. There should have been a second goal when Santi Jimenez did have the chances. There should have been a penalty when Nkunku is first fouled, which is not given. Then he's fouled again, but seemingly there was a hand or whatever in there. Allegri lost his cool, threw again his jacket. He went berserk, was sent off as well. Don't like that personally, but it is what it is. Milan get the 3 points, so you're 3 points ahead of Inter. And on Monday, Verona Cremonese, only a 0-0, and Como also only a 1-1 against Genoa with a red card for them as well. So, kind of middling start, I think, for Como, and we all expected Como might actually hit the next level. Let's glance briefly over the Premier League results. I mean, Nottingham Forest, there was a whole Nuno Espirito Santo sacking and now Ange Postecoglou in. Something that on the face of it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I guess this is the way that Forest, not Spurs, want to be going. Postecoglou Spurs is still very automatic with me. They go to Arsenal and lose, of course, 3-0, but it's the next game that will tell us a little bit more. If I look at the other ones, I mean, Everton-Aston Villa, that's a classic duel, ended only 0-0, and I yet have to see footage from the new stadium of Everton. I have not really been looking out for that one. I also have to point out Spurs, 3-0 at West Ham, that seemingly had got the turnaround. No, not really. Chelsea were held to a 2-2 draw at Brentford. Liverpool very lucky against Burnley. I mean, Burnley battered them in many ways, but cannot find the breakthrough. And Salah scores a penalty. Really another escape for Liverpool. Liverpool absolutely not convincing this season so far. However, they get the wins. And then City beat United easily. And it's so boring for me to talk about United because they're not the team that we used to have 20 years ago. They're an absolute atrocity at the moment. Probably the worst run club. Is it? Well, I would say the worst run club or the worst run top club that we currently have. And Milan is in there as well. But at least for Milan, there's here and there something showing. For United, I don't know where it's going. I think Ruben Amorim is just begging to be fired. I mean, he's literally begging to be fired. He wants to be put out of his misery, and the board is hanging on to him. It doesn't make sense. In the Bundesliga, I just want to pick out a couple of results. I mean, Hjulman is taking over from Ten Hag at Leverkusen and got the first win. It was a 3-1 over Frankfurt. A little bit surprising because Frankfurt is probably a very well-run team, but they already had 2-0 halftime lead. Schick scoring late in the first half. Özil then pulls one back. Then 2 red cards for Leverkusen, one in the 59th, one in stoppage time, but Grimaldo still makes it then 3-1. So Leverkusen sorta kinda almost back on track. Crazy 3-3 between Wolfsburg and Köln. That was probably a fun game. Dortmund get a 2-0 away win at Heidenheim. Freiburg win the derby against Stuttgart. It's very important for them. Bayern over HSV a 5-0, and this could probably have gotten really ugly. And then lastly, Werder Bremen win 4-0 at Gladbach, and Gerardo Seoane has been fired. Gladbach celebrated just now 125 years of existence, and then you're downed by Bremen. Doesn't look good. La Liga also had their share of interesting results. Alaves beating Bilbao away from home. I didn't expect that. Real Madrid went down early to 10 men. However, Kylian Mbappe saves the day. They win 2-1 at Real Sociedad. That red card caused a lot of uproar in Spain. Atletico Madrid get the win over Villarreal. That's actually a pretty big win for them. Celta only 1-1 against Girona. Girona only have a single point so far, so they also look to be in trouble. And then Barcelona had to play at the Johan Cruyff Stadium in front of about 6,000 people. That's the same size as Blau-Weiß that I have just down the road here. Really odd. And I wonder, why do they build this stadium even so small? I mean, could you just have it? I mean, the minimum regulations I think in Spain is around 9,000 or 10,000, maybe 12,000. For Barcelona B, should be possible to do that. In any case, Lamine Yamal was not playing because he came back with an injury, which also caused a whole lot of trouble. And Barcelona ended up winning easily against Valencia with Fermin Lopez, Lewandowski coming off the bench, and Rafinha coming off the bench, all scoring a brace. Barcelona for the first time kind of convincing. And then yesterday evening, Espanyol, wild game 3-2 over Mallorca. While we're on the Iberian Peninsula, let's look at the results in Portugal. Benfica dropped points. 1-1 only at home against Santa Clara, whereas Sporting 2-1 away win at Famalicão. Porto also winning 1-0 over Nacional. So kind of getting interesting in Portugal. When I also look at Vitória Guimarães getting the first points, and Braga lose at home to Gil Vicente, another surprising result. And now we're getting in territory that I really haven't followed already. Portugal, I have not really looked. In France, PSG got a 2-0 home win over Lens, but more injuries. There's major injury woes. We have already Desiree, we have Dembélé out, now Kvaratskhelia is out, and even Luis Enrique is injured himself, but they get a 2-0 win over Lens, but it was not easy. The Parisian neighbors, Paris FC, win 2-1 at Brest. We have Rennes, a 3-1 over Lyon, so also getting a good win. Nice 1-0 over Nantes. Marseille 4-0 over Lorient, and Lille also continuing their good run with a 2-1 over Toulouse. Strasbourg is also a European team, 1-0 over Le Havre. And usually I start my journey through Europe in the Netherlands. Now let's end it there for once. Ajax over Zwolle 3-1, and then a crazy 5-3 PSV over Nijmegen. That's a really, really interesting result. I probably should watch highlights of that one. Maybe I will do it later on if I find the time. Feyenoord also winning 1-0 over Heerenveen. Utrecht losing at home to Groningen is probably a surprise result. AZ also getting a 2-1 away win at Heracles. But that's pretty much all I can tell you for now. Let's go into the Champions League preview. Well, but before we dive into the league phase and any predictions and looking at the matches, let's go through qualifying. I have hinted at that for a long time, and I want to do it for actually no other reason, because I've created these files. I should have probably talked about them sooner, but I usually create this while qualification is ongoing. But it's always good to look at a few highlights. And now, if you look, for instance, at the first round, and I give you the return results plus the aggregate result, the one that I need to point out is Kairat from Kazakhstan, the Kazakh champions, who ousted Olimpia Ljubljana with a 2-0 home win on the 3-1 on aggregate, whereas the result of that round is that Hamrun Spartans from Malta beat Žalgiris in a 13 penalty each shootout. Absolute epic shootout, and the Hamrun Spartans actually made it through, so a big win for Malta. On the second page, not too many interesting results in there. I would say Inter Descaldes from Andorra winning the return leg against FCSB from Romania is probably a standout result. Also Breiðablik from Iceland, a 5-0 return win over Ignatia from Albania. And then Budućnost did lose to Noah, and Noah actually ended up in a league phase themselves. Now the second round gave us the first interesting ties with teams that we would regard as regulars in a group stage. But I again want to start with Kairat. They always play early because Kazakhstan is so way ahead of us. They had a 2-0 deficit against QPS, but won 3-0 at home, and so advanced to the next round. The Finnish champions are out. FC Copenhagen, an easy over Drita from the Kosovo. We had also Dynamo Kiev ending the Hamrun Spartans' hopes for a Champions League berth was never happening. And Red Star Belgrade in a resounding 6-1 aggregate win over the Lincoln Red Imps, who also made it into the group phase in the end. On page 2, the bottom tie is probably the most interesting one. Rangers beating Panathinaikos 3-1 on aggregate. They had a 2-0 home lead. I think Panathinaikos were actually quite well in the game. I think in the return leg, they scored a goal after wasting chance after chance, and then Rangers pounce and get the equalizer, and therefore Rangers go through to the next round. Other interesting ties, Ferencváros against Noah. That was a pretty goal-filled affair with a 6-4 aggregate for Ferencváros. Also Ludogorets in overtime over Rijeka, the surprise Croatian champions. And on page 3, there are two ties that are a little bit outstanding. It is Salzburg against Brann Bergen. Brann actually had the lead in that one in the first leg, however, then Salzburg came back and I think led already 3-1 at the halftime, winning 4-1 overall. And then Brann again score early in the return leg, however, almost immediately. Beautiful free kick, and Salzburg get the equalizer and cruise on to the next round, although they probably should have gotten the win there too. And then Servette had a 1-0 lead from Pilsen. However, Pilsen turned it around, winning 3-1 away from home and move on. Now reaching the third qualifying round is already a major milestone because it guarantees you a Europa League berth. The previous rounds, I think if you lost that one, I think the first round you go directly into the Conference League. Second round, I'm not sure if you go then also into the Conference League or you go down in the Europa League. We'll see that when we'll talk about the Europa League. But again, there were some good ties. I mean, Copenhagen against Malmö, these are neighbors. It ended 0-0 first, and then Copenhagen is just a better team than Malmö. 5-0 at home, that's rather resounding. And they just needed to across the Öresund. So that actually should be played way more often than it probably is. Fenerbahce had a deficit from the first leg at Feyenoord. However, Feyenoord cannot hold on, and Fenerbahce win 5-2. The hopes for Mourinho reaching a Champions League were still high at that point. As really outstanding result was Paphos 3-0 on aggregate over Dynamo Kiev. I mean, knowing what Paphos was, we just knew about them now, kind of, when they made it into the Conference League. Were they in the quarterfinals or something like that? No, semifinals, not semifinals, round of 16. But yeah, Dynamo Kiev is a known quantity, so yeah, while it's a war-torn country, it still was a little bit of a surprise. Rangers actually cruised in the first leg against Viktoria Pilsen, winning 3-0, so they could afford a 2-1 home loss. Club Brugge was just way too good for Salzburg, I gotta say, and they won the first leg by being violent. The second leg, Salzburg had actually a 2-0 lead, but then squandered it all away, and Club Brugge win both matches. I always had the feeling that, in their good times, Salzburg probably would have given Club Brugge a real fight. In their current state, it was just never gonna be. Ferencváros beat Ludogorets, then Slovan lose on penalties against Kairat. This was the one tie where you thought that Kairat might not make it, but Kairat go on through penalties, and that will be a trend going forward. Benfica had no problem with Nice, 4-0 on aggregate, and Red Star Belgrade, in a duel with very lively fan base with Lech Poznan, win 4-2 on aggregate. And so we go into the playoffs, the last step to the Champions League, the first time that you hear the Champions League anthem being played, also the first step where we already need new jerseys. We cannot just use the league jerseys, there the regulations already are on. And the team that I'm wearing, huge 5-0 win over Sturm Graz. Sturm Graz didn't know what hit them. It was rather embarrassing for Sturm Graz, I gotta say. They got in there knowing that it will be tough. Europa League semi-finalists, but with their style of play they could. And yes, Böving had the chance to give them the 1-0 lead, but what then happened is just Sturm being flattened by Bodø Glimt, who left no doubt who is the better team. And yes, they were very good in finishing as well. We had some other interesting results as well. We had Kairat beating Celtic on penalties. Celtic cannot break down Kairat, and I think it was the Japanese, was it Ueda, who was the unlucky guy. I think he gave away a penalty that got then saved, and he had a huge chance in the return leg to actually send Celtic through, and then he misses the decisive penalty as well. So was not his day at all in the end. Kairat move on, and that's rather sensational. They start in the first qualifying round all the way to the group stage, and no one wanted to have Kairat away from home, although it's probably a beatable opponent. We had Paphos ousting Crvena Zvezda, the winning goal, in the return leg. They won 2-1 away from home. Crvena Zvezda had a 1-0 lead, and then an absolute gorgeous goal to make it 1-1 and send Paphos through to the group stage. Sturm at least won the return leg. Karabakh had some nervy moments against Ferencváros at home, but in the end win 5-4 on aggregate. Benfica, a single goal, and Mourinho was sacked by Fenerbahce then, but Benfica through to the group stage as well, and Club Brugge completely flattened Rangers. It was not a good night for Scottish teams. That much is for certain. A 9-1 on aggregate, and yes, a red card early on for Rangers definitely did help. And Copenhagen also with, I don't want to say considerable ease, but it was not hard for them to beat Basel to move into the group stage. So immediately after the qualifications round, we had, of course, the big draw. And I have to say, the Champions League draw is just boring now. I mean, it's pressing buttons, and they could do it a little bit more interesting. Don't show all the opponents. Just show the opponents that you play at home. I think that keeps a little bit some interest, but not do it this way. It's just, it's boring as can be, and then you don't even know in what order you will be, and many people were confused. No, this was only confirmed the Saturday after the draw in what order these teams will be playing, and you cannot shake the feeling that certain things are fabricated. I mean, if you press the button, yeah, I know it's hard to make a draw, but I don't think we need an entire show for that, especially a show with a half-hour run-up. In any case, we had 4 pots. Every team plays against 2 other teams from each pot, so you could not play against the same teams from the same country, which I understand, but I think it's a major restriction. I think one that is hitting PSG, because if we look now at the league phase opponents, the champions PSG actually have one of the toughest draws. I mean, Bayern at home, Barcelona away, then Atalanta, Leverkusen, Spurs, Sporting, Sporting, both relatively hard opponents out of pot 3, and even Newcastle and Athletic Club. I mean, that's a rather spicy draw. Still, PSG will scrape through, and we know from last season, PSG don't need to be in the top 8. They just scraped through and then made it all the way to the final and became the best team in Europe. So, the league phase, we learned a little bit. Yeah, it's nice to finish high up, but if you get rolling and you have a talented squad, it's all about the knockout stage. If I look at the opponents from pot 1, for the teams from pot 1, Inter comes out with the biggest improvement in chances. To be honest, it's probably down to the opponents from pot 3 and 4 that helped them there, because Liverpool, Dortmund, Arsenal and Atleti is not that easy, although I think Dortmund away is probably more manageable. Atleti, yeah, the Simeone factor is in there, but then Slavia, Ajax, Kairat and Union Saint-Gilloise is probably not that bad. If you look at pot 2, Arsenal also have it relatively easy. Again, I mean, the first 3 opponents, they are tough, but the rest is all relatively easy for Arsenal. Even, I think, going to Athletic Club, not a hard trip for at least an Arsenal side. Is really hitting the next level, I think. They are really deep. Juventus also surprisingly a relatively good draw, although when I look at the opponents, I mean, Dortmund and Real Madrid, there's a lot of history there between those 3 teams. But in Benfica, they have never done well against Benfica, Villarreal, but again, it's the latter 4 opponents, although I want to see Juve go up to the polar circle and being flattened, although you never know. I gotta say. I also find it interesting Frankfurt play against Atalanta. I think the fans are twinned, but also against Napoli, where there's a huge rivalry. So that is one to watch out for sure. And you have everything there. You can pick out for your favorite team. PSV got hammered in the draw from pot 3. The positive ones, Ajax and Spurs potentially, but those are already teams where we think they might have a hard time getting out the group stage. And for pot 4, Newcastle, of course, a really tough opponent. You have Barcelona, PSG, 2 of the best teams, at least from last season. Then you play Benfica, Leverkusen, PSV, OM and Athletic Club, and then Union Saint-Gilloise. So yeah, not what you really wanna see, but we gotta see. The games have to be played, as I love to say. And given all these opponents, I ran my 10,000 simulations, and here are my predictions for the league. And Arsenal is gonna win that one. Arsenal just slightly ahead of Liverpool, Barcelona, Real Madrid and City, and it's because Arsenal have a manageable draw. Let's call it that way. PSG only in 8th spot. The tough draw is showing signs, but just moving in. It will change. That much is for certain. But the usual suspects would be up top, then Inter, Spurs, Napoli. I think that Inter is overrated here because, they have good odds. They have a high rating because making it to the Champions League final. The eye test tells me that you should at least flip Inter and Napoli. But that will happen throughout the season. Let's look also on the bubble. We have the Portuguese teams in there. We have Monaco, Athletic Club, OM, Gala, Frankfurt, Ajax, PSV at the moment on the outside looking in. So you see already. And I would say Olympiacos maybe could spring a surprise, potentially Club Brugge. But the latest Copenhagen, I think those teams are not that good anymore. I would think. But we'll see. Surprises are always possible. When we transfer, the league standings don't tell us all that much, but we can at least transfer them into a potential bracket based on these league standings, and that makes it more interesting. And it also tells us that it's not that hard in a way if you finish a little bit lower. Look at PSG. If they finish in 8th spot, yes, they would have a quarterfinal against Arsenal, but from what we've seen, I think they could manage that. Leverkusen against Dortmund would of course be a really nice matchup. But you see, we have a little bit of a better feeling, and it seems for the top teams all too manageable. I even would like in the lower quadrants Napoli's chances up until they hit Barcelona. I think Barcelona is a team that has shown that they can hurt Napoli. As for the overall favorites, well, their Arsenal is not on top, but just by a smidgen Liverpool ahead. Liverpool are the top favorites, strongest team from the Premier League, even though they have not been really convincing. I also think of Barcelona and PSG also have not been convincing yet. Real Madrid also in there. I would say the top 6, I don't think that Bayern, I hear in the German-speaking world they speak about Bayern winning the Champions League. I don't feel it. I really don't feel it. I think it's among the top 6 will be the winner. That's rather slim. If I look at the Italian teams, Inter, Napoli, kinda in there, but Napoli already with some distance. But again, the rating is kind of hurting them. Okay, let's look at the fixtures of the first match day. As I said, Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. Starts with Athletic Club against Arsenal. PSV, the Dutch against the Belgian champions. Really interesting. I probably said the Club Brugge were Belgian champions. That was wrong. Union Saint-Gilloise is the Belgian champion. And then Juve Dortmund, that used to be a final in 97. An absolute surprise match-up. Madrid against OM is probably one-sided. Probably Spurs against Villarreal. I also like the duel of the Greek and the Cypriot champions. Olympiacos against Paphos. And Slavia hosting Bodø Glimt. And let me tell you, I've been in the Slavia fan shop. They are really gearing up majorly for Champions League. You could find Champions League patches everywhere in there, and it was like go to Bodø, watch go Bodø Glimt. A traditional duel between Ajax and Inter, although Inter should win that one easy. Ajax is also not that good. Bayern Chelsea replay of the 2012 final. They meet again. Will it be another heartbreak? I also think at Liverpool Atletico Madrid, there is a little bit of history, as is with PSG against Atalanta. Remember when PSG reached the final in the Corona season and they needed a last-minute goal to beat Atalanta. And then on Thursday, City against Napoli. That is one that has me really intrigued. Kevin De Bruyne coming back, there are plenty of United players at Napoli. I think that is a really intriguing matchup. It is also a kind of a measuring stick for Napoli. Can we survive at City? Newcastle, Barcelona, there's also memories from Austria and Kairat start at Sporting. I also think at Eintracht against Galatasaray, I would imagine tons of Turkish fans there. So, quite interesting matches, and that's what UEFA quite does well. The first match day is kind of the one where you really want to feed good games, and then you just pick and choose and have a few good games in each round. Of course, the results at first will not matter all that much, but it will give us at least something to look out for. So this ends this rather lengthy episode. I needed to get a Champions League preview in, and yes, I was probably a little bit short on the other stuff, but next week we'll see how it will work out. It was just a rather rough start to the week, and so had to be a little bit shorter on the league part. Ideally I would have done 2 episodes, but this would have been just way too much work. I have to be honest with that. In any case, please let me know what you thought, or which results on the weekend did stand out for you, and who do you think will win the Champions League? I have a feeling it will be an English team. Although it would fit in the rim that Real Madrid would actually do something as well. I don't think the PSG will repeat, although personally I probably would even like that. I would love to see Napoli go deep in that competition. I just don't really find it that this will happen. I know that Barcelona is focusing on that one. So I'm throwing out a few favorites. Who is your favorite to win the Champions League? Drop a line below. If I had to pick one English team, and it sounds ridiculous because they are not a traditional force, but let's say Arsenal. Maybe Arsenal can do it. I'll pick Arsenal. Kiss of death. Potentially. In any case, drop a line below. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this podcast episode. Leave a comment below. Leave a good review. Tell somebody else if you enjoyed this episode. Maybe they might enjoy that one too, to grow this community a little bit more. And as always, please enjoy the games, and I'll talk to you soon about more things in my soccer universe. Bye!